Hi everyone, it's Mio and welcome back to my channel Miochrome, and today it's finally time for a new doll, and since we're kind of still around Halloween season, she's going to be a bit spooky themed. Now, was this supposed to be a Halloween special and be uploaded before Halloween? Maybe, but I'm busy guys, and who says we can only have spooky themes in October? I didn't really plan this one, but I just suddenly knew I really wanted to make a bat girl, as in a girl that is a bat, not the bat girl. So my first step is to look at different bats to draw inspiration from, and I might have fallen into a rabbit hole where I just spent hours looking at pictures of these grey long-eared bats because they are so cute, that little face. Anyway, I guess this is settled, so I have to choose a fitting base doll. I think Ghoulia is a pretty good fit because she has this very small and triangular head shape, and that super small upturned nose is also pretty fitting. And of course she's grey. I was missing her hand, so I gave her Avia's black gloves, which will fit right into my outfit plans. This girl has been through some stuff, so let's wash her first. Does Ghoulia have different sized eyes? Is it like a monster thing, or does mine have a misprint? I'm chopping off her hair next. When it is all as short as it gets, I put her head in boiling hot water to soften it. I then pull the head off and pull all the hair and gunky glue out of her neck hole. She will have some giant bat ears, so we don't need those. I try to cut them off as clean as possible and refine after. You never know if a pair of ears will come in handy in another project. Next, I will get rid of her face with acetone. Now that I can see her face mold better, I am actually even more pleased with my choice. These eye molds are pretty small though, might be a little challenge when I paint them. I smoothen the parts where I cut off the ears, but sanding is semi-successful on soft vinyl. I also get rid of mold lines as good as possible, even tried the quick wipe with acetone, but I can never get it seamless because parts of them are indented. I guess you'd have to fill those parts in, or if you have any tips, let me know. She won't have blue in her color scheme, so I removed the paint from her gloves too. Grey long-eared bats are known for being grey and, you guessed it, having really long and giant ears, so of course our bat girl will have some of those too. I first create the rough shape with some wire. An additional supporting piece of wire will help me sculpting on top of it. Epoxy sculpt can be very heavy, and I don't know if the head wouldn't be able to support it later, so I first tried to make the base from lightweight material. This is plastering tape, which is used to work on walls or something. It is actually sticky on the side and perfect to lay down the shape and work on top of it. To make sure it doesn't come off, I additionally fixate it with hot glue. I can then begin shaping the ears with air dry clay, which is a very lightweight and also inexpensive type of clay, so it's a good base to save up on the much more expensive epoxy. Once that's dry, I prepare the epoxy sculpt and refine the shape to its final form. I keep a close look at some reference pictures and I try to shape them similarly. The grey long-eared bat has some interesting structure inside the ears. I want to create a similar structure by carving it inside. I then cover the whole ear with a layer of epoxy sculpt. After curing, I feel like the structure looks too simple and too much like what it is, some carved in lines. Since it is all rock solid now, I have no other choice than to do some correction with my Proxon tool. I shaved everything down so that they are more like stairs rather than just simple lines. Larger chunks I cut out with an X-Acto knife to save time, and then I refine by sanding. I think it looks a lot more elaborate like this. With some more epoxy, I then fill in the bottom to hide the hair holes. As you might have noticed in the reference pictures, grey long-eared bats have this little thing in front of their ears, kind of like another smaller ear. Those I cut out from Warbler and attached them with the help of those pins. By heating the Warbler up, I can give it a more natural rounded shape. Now I prime the insides of the ears black and attach the smaller ears. To make the ears look more coherent, I then sculpt the connecting piece. Of course, I couldn't resist sculpting here some cute fangs too. I definitely prefer if fangs are actually 3D and not just painted on. Now it's time to paint the ears. For this I try to color match Julia's skin tone as close as possible. It's a very warm light grey, so I mixed a lot of yellows and browns into the normal light grey. I put in some shading too, that's why it looks kind of dark on her yet unblushed body. If the ears will look dark still later, I'll go over those parts again with a lighter grey. The ears need some shading on the insides too, and I also used this very pretty pastel purple to give them a tint, which brings us right to the color scheme she's going to have. For her color scheme, I want to use a pastel purple, which will look really nice with her grey skin. I have this purplish grey hair, but I think it's a bit too grey and blends in too much with the doll's skin color. I have this purple too, but this on the other hand is too saturated and looks kind of cheap on her. So to get the perfect blend, I'll have to make the rerooting process even more tedious and blend some purple hairs into the grey strands. Talking about tedious, I have a lot of these wefts that I get off AliExpress. They are really good quality in my opinion and also heat resistant, all while being super affordable. But they only ever come in wefts and I 100% prefer reroots. I found out a while ago that the hair is sewed in doubled, so you can actually keep the length if you pull the strand out whole. You'll have to cut the yarn off, and after a while you will be able to unravel the middle seam. It's pretty tricky at first, especially the first few ones I had to throw out. There is a bit of glue on them too, but if you manage to pull the yarn out, it will get easier after pulling out the first few strands. After a while of fiddling with it, it was fairly easy to pull out the single strands. The good thing is that thanks to the glue, the strands are already pre-sections and easy to put on the rerooting tool. Luckily, the purple hair is double the length, so I can just cut it off and fold it over the rerooting tool to match the length of the grey hair. I take one of the grey strands from the wefts and each time mix in 1 to 3 or sometimes a little more of single purple hairs. I want the purple to just be a tint in the grey hair. I thought that the hair color was close enough to the grey, so I left it like this, but then changed my mind, so I color matched it after finishing the front row. It all kind of chips off later though. I think it was because of the thin residue of watered down epoxy sculpt on her scalp. The doll I used had a side part, but I wanted my doll to have a middle part, so I make the holes as I go and always push in 2 strands into the part holes so that I will have enough hair to part. And then it's just filling every remaining hole. When it comes to dolls, I never really plan out the designs, but build it up as I go. For some reason the color combos are always my starting point to get inspired. I don't have that when I draw character designs. Many people draw out their designs first, and although drawing characters is among my favorite things to do, I really enjoy just letting the materials I have point me in a certain direction. This way I come up with things that I wouldn't have thought of just drawing, and in turn these ideas boost my creativity when I'm drawing characters. This is the color difference in the end, and I think it really paid off. The purple shimmer in the grey hair really elevates it. Putting in multiple colors definitely elevates the look of every hair, but it's also so much more work. To fixate the hair, I put some heat-resistant waterproof glue into the neck hole and spread it to all the plugs inside the head. After it's all dry, I carefully separate the hair at the part line and tie it together so that it stays in place. The boil wash is where the magic happens. I pour boiling hot water over the head and it will make the hair lie flat and keep its shape. This is why the glue needs to be heat resistant and waterproof. With the hair laying flat, it revealed some parts that needed some rework, so I repeat the process for those sections. I start out by sketching in the eye with black and the waterline with a burgundy color. I'd run the eyes rather a bit lower on the face than higher to make the face look cute and small. I draw on some eyelids, lashes and also the iris. Occasionally I also do a bit of shading with some dark grey pastels. When the placement of the eyes is set, I sketch in the eyebrows. After looking at her again, I decide that I want to elongate the eyes a bit more further out. I'm going for a cute and at the same time sassy look. I then define the eye with a bit more detail and lay down the first layer of white for the eyeballs. I then go in with more blushing and I use the same pastel purple as her eyeshadow and a pink for her cheeks and lips. Next I do all the shading with dark grey pastels. With the white pencil I can refine the eye shape a bit more. The waterline got a bit thick there because I wanted to push the lower outer half a bit more out, so I'm doing it by shaping the eyeball. Now it's time to deepen all the colors and draw in the lower lashes. For her eye color, I decided on a pink and the darker parts will be a burgundy color. So I sketch in the iris and pupil with that burgundy color first. I then fill in the iris with a light pink. I decided to put her head back on her body now and then continue with the face up. What I do from here is just a lot of refining and eventually switching to gouache and acrylics to deepen the colors. I put some black shading under her upper eyelids for depth and lighten up her waterline a lot. I then further refine the iris until they are the color I had in mind. I wasn't quite sure what color to use for the lips, but in the end settled for this dark purple. As a last step, I put in some highlights and the face up is done. Let's free her from her hair protection and see how well the face goes with her hair. I think it's perfect. I got these fishnets some time ago from AliExpress. They are way too big, but the fabric itself is perfect. It's an easy fix. I just fit it to the doll, holding it in place with needles and then sew along. In the end, I can just cut off the overlapping fabric. You probably noticed that I say AliExpress a lot. Honestly, it's a really good platform for doll stuff in my opinion. They have so many things and I think anywhere else stuff like that is pretty overpriced. So, if you need a filler to get your €10 free choice shipping, just look for some doll stuff, it always pays off for me. So with the fishnets done, I'm moving on to her dress. I had this Enchantarium Stormy pattern already cut out because I was thinking about making it for my deep diver before giving her Frankie's dress. I used this divine looking grey satin, which for some reason I seem to just want to suffer doing my sewing projects, because why do I always choose satin? The first pain begins right at the start because I for the life of me couldn't figure out how to hem the fabric and make it stay without glue protruding to the other side. I'll spare you all my failed attempts and jump right into the only thing that worked for me, which was attaching a thin and soft piece of fabric to the inside, and because of the extra thickness, it is now easier to fold over cleanly. Now I can sew that part to the bottom half. I sew some darts to the side to make it fit better on the doll's chest. I noticed that it was quite long, so it needs a little trim, and back onto the bottom half. The next step is to sew on the two back pieces. Please be warned, I am an absolute newbie to sewing and especially using the sewing machine. It doesn't help that all my sewing projects to practice on are literally like 4 centimeters long. So I kind of failed sewing along the line, and as a result her dress is now flashing her butt. But I was determined to find a solution without starting again. If I could sew another piece of fabric in place, the seams could even be a nice detail. But I first cut her dress a lot shorter and sew some Velcro on the pieces that do fit. The bottom half would need some Velcro too to still be able to get off the doll, so I actually need to divide the filler piece in 2 parts. That doesn't really make it easier to get to be symmetrical. But I did my best and I called my mom for help a lot too. I placed the Velcro first and from there sew the pieces left and right down to the bottom. Okay, it's actually pretty crooked, but the front looks fine and the dress itself is actually cute. If it was all neatly sewn together, I'd even prefer the extra seams with the extra piece of fabric at the back. It just adds a nice touch. I hide some of the unclean mess at the top of the bag with another piece of fabric and install a little push button. This way I can also pull the front back to make it sit tighter. Now finally the shoes. I wanted to have some plateau ankle boots, some nice and big chunky ones. These Old Monster high boots are going to be my base, but first I need to cover those teeth up and make them look like the normal tip of a boot. I also need to remodel the soles. So as you have probably noticed, her style is a bit edgy but feminine at the same time. My vision for her was goth GF, like not really goth but more like this vibe. While sculpting, I decided to cut off the molded shoelaces too. I'm a sucker for real shoelaces on dolls, so that's what she will get. This means I can also cut the shoe tongue in half. It's actually a nice side effect because her feet will get more room, and those shoes are pretty hard to get on her feet, with these fishnets also taking up space. I am modeling on an extra layer of plateau and model in the structure of the sole. The shape of the shoe overall has become a bit too round and clunky. It begins to remind me of my deep divers metal boots. I need to sand it down anyway to get the edges nice and clean, and while I'm at it, I just sand down a little more until I get a more elegant shape. I also drill away some material on the inside to give the feet a little more space. Next part is priming all the parts where there could be a seam black. These pieces of fake leather come from one of those fake leather leggings. The material is super thin and perfect to wrap around. It is perfect to make the shoes really look like they were made out of leather. I glued on piece by piece, and when the glue is dry, I cut it into shape with an X-Acto knife. It needs to be extremely sharp for it to work. Letting a layer of wood glue dry on a piece of fabric first makes the process a lot easier. I glued another piece over the front piece of the shoe. This way it hides bumpy spots from the sculpt underneath better. When it's all finished, I paint the soles black. But if you look at it, it doesn't look that nice because the structures of both materials look very similar and the soles are way too shiny. To make it look more like a sole, I use EVA foam because it looks a lot like the rubber some shoes have as their sole. I wrap and glue it around in a similar manner and then again cut it until it fits. I can then just push in little dents into the foam and it will stay like this. Shoes always have this layer between the sole and the fabric, and I want to imitate this with this rubber band. It will also help hide imperfections. Now the last part, real shoelaces. I mark where I want the holes first and make sure they are even. I then push through with a needle and then with a thicker crochet needle. I would have needed another one in between the thicknesses that I had, but the second best one would not go through. So I just had to pull the lace into the eye of the smaller needle and pull it through by force. I am amazed that it didn't rip the entire shoe apart. Actually, it did not even take damage in the slightest, although this process was kind of brutal. I did leave out the molded in zippers of the original shoes when I glued on the fabric so that I can still use them as a detail. As a last step, I paint those silver. Our bat girl has some nice big ears, but it wouldn't be a bat without some nice bat wings. To start off, I sketched the shape of the wings on a sturdy piece of paper. I then cut it out to use as a template. I transferred to Warbler, which is what I'm going to use for the bones. As you can see, I planned on giving her a joint on the wings, but I decided it looks weird and unrealistic with the wing shape, so I might just do that a bit more thought out another time. Since I work with Warbler, I can just stick the pieces together with some heat. I also curl the wings a bit with the heat. The in-between skin can now just be filled with some regular EVA foam. I cut a piece for each section and glue it on using super glue. It's a good material to use because it will never come off. Once all the sections are glued in, I take a pen to draw in the wing shape as symmetrically as possible. Then I cut along with an X-Acto knife. This looks still pretty flat, so with some more epoxy sculpt, I build up the bones to make them more three-dimensional. I also pre-sculpt the little thumb claw or whatever you call it. Once all the bones are sculpted, I can use another piece of epoxy and push the now cured claw in. I have these tiny hinges that I'm going to attach the wings to so she can move them later. By the way, these are the same hinges I ordered after I had to salvage one from a plastic box for my deep diver girly. Some of the base of the wings needs to be cut off to place the hinges nicely, but before I attach them I'll give the wings a spray of primer. Then I use all the techniques I can think of to make the hinges stick. I use pins, super glue and baking powder. To attach the wings to the back, I make 2 deep cuts into her back so that I can push the hinge inside later. But first I need to sculpt some last details and also hide the hinges. And I also paint everything before attaching the wings permanently. For the bones, it's the same procedure as with the ears. I mix a warm light grey and shade with dark greys. I also do a little blushing with pink. The skins and her little hook are going to be the same pastel greyish purple as her hair. I also noticed that grey long-eared bats have super thin wings that show their veins through them. I wanted to incorporate that into my wing design, so I paint some vein patterns on them. With lighter and darker colors, I make them look a little more three-dimensional. The shading with pastels I just do on top of it so that the veins will also be a little toned down at the same time. I also use the dark pastels to make the 3D effect more realistic. This is the last step for the wings, so now I can permanently glue them into the slots. We're almost done. Just one last thing I want to give her is a choker. I'm making it out of Worbler and it's pretty simple. I just cut a strip, heat it up and wrap it around a Monster High doll's neck. Once I'm happy with the placement, I can cut off the piece I don't need, and because of the small gap at the back you can easily remove it and put it on again. Now for the final step I just need to paint it black. The hair needs some shape too, and for that I cut the 2 strands framing her face shorter. Using my mini hair straightener, I do round motions to make the strands fall nicely inward, and I do the same with the rest of the hair. That's it, she's done! I actually really love how she turned out, and yeah, tell me if you like her too and what you like about her. I actually really like reading your comments and I always get really excited about them. So I hope I will see you in the next one, and if you're not subscribed and you want to see the next one, then now's your chance. Or not if you don't. Anyway, bye!